Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Well, everybody knows it's March, and so that means we are in the midst of March Madness. So for all of you out there that don't know, I'm not a huge sports fan, but basketball is kind of my thing because when I was growing up in the Chicago suburbs, and the Bulls were winning every year. It was amazing. We had Michael Jordan, we had Dennis Rodman, we had Scottie Pippen. It was like the dream team, right? And then I went from there to the University of Kentucky, and Rick Pitino was the coach, and we were winning at Kentucky, and it was just awesome. And I was so excited about it. Now my kids, who are probably the shortest kids in town, are playing basketball. And even though they're the tiny ones, we just love the game. And I heard this story about an Irish bar in Staten Island being the originators of the March Madness tournament bracket. And I was like, I got to talk to this guy. So I have Terence Haggerty with me. He is the owner of Jody's Club Forest in Staten Island. Terence, thanks for joining me today.
You got it, Tudor. Thank you for having me. So it's been a quite the last couple of weeks,
But yeah,
to say the least. Yeah, the AP did a story, and I'm starting to learn a little bit about journalism too, because I realized that when the AP does a story, it really goes out throughout the whole entire country. So I've had calls from multiple people, so it's been a pretty cool experience to be able to tell my father's story. My dad's not here anymore, so. I'm kind of, I guess, the spokesperson for this
Yeah.
right now. So, I'm the youngest of five, and I'm the only one who really wanted to do what he did for his whole life, basically. So I've taken the bull by the horns in a way and, tried to get his story out there as best as I can.
Well, that's actually part of the beauty of this. I lost my dad a few years ago, and my dad was he was a steel expert, and his thing was rail castings. And I love to be able to talk about his legacy. Your dad is so much bigger than life. I mean, especially in your community. And I think that is really the beauty of your story, and probably why you're getting so much attention, because we're looking for something that is a good story, a feel-good story about a family who works together, but your whole community came together. And I think that, honestly, I feel like that is the future that everybody is looking for. And the future that everybody's looking for comes out of these stories from the past. And so I want to go into how this happened, because I can't even imagine what it was like for you guys as kids when this started up he opened the bar in 76, and then the bracket started in 77, right?
Yes. So we started we opened in June of 76. Actually, in about a year and a half, we'll be here 50 years. So we are very excited about that, because we're still running a day-to-day restaurant bar. It's really we've been here a long time. So it's a real, we're kind of pillars of the community, I would say. But, back in the late 70s, 76, 77, my father was only 27 years old. And I couldn't imagine running this place when I was 27. I was not mature enough. He probably wasn't mature enough. But, with the helping of my mother's father, they got started in June of 76, like I just said. And in March of that following year, him and his just guys sitting around, just talking. There was no internet, obviously. So, you did a lot of talking back then. And, there was probably some drinking involved as well. So they decided they were going to run a pool, where it basically all you had to do was pick the final four. You didn't have to pick every game, like the brackets and stuff like that. But you just had to pick the final four, the winner of the tournament, and the total points of the final game. Now, easy, right? You would think it was easy. So that first year we had 88 picks in. I always say I fast forward to 2006 because there's so many stories in between those 30 years, but just the full scope of it was 88 entries in 77, and then our very last year we had over 160,000 entries. From picks.
My gosh. I mean, that is him. But to me, this is the most incredible part about this is what people don't think. There was no internet. This was before. I mean, this is just like at the beginning, in the midst of this, you see computers. I mean, when they're doing this, it's, not even the Apple IIe. That was the first computer I remember, This is all by hand.
It was all by hand in the beginning.
Crazy.
And then we got into computers, I would say like early 90s was when it really got big. I know you went to Kentucky, and I hate to bring this up. 92 was a very big year. That was the year the Leitner shot. So I'm very sorry I had to bring that up.
Yes.
But I do remember that it was a Friday night. I was only 10 and I was here. And the place was going crazy. And it felt like, to me as a 10-year-old, like how wild it was. And then after that, it exploded. I put something on Instagram the other day. I don't really talk about it on like social media and stuff like that. Like if you came to my place, like I don't have anything hanging up saying like we're the home of the pool and stuff. I made some t-shirts once. That was about it.
You were saying, that wasn't really your dad's thing to go out there and brag about it, and it wasn't really your mom's thing. And you're kind of honoring that legacy by just running the business and not bragging on what was there. But I do think that it is something for the public, for the American public. Like I said, we all look for a feel-good story, and it's something so unique because I think once you break it down, the first 88 people begin this. But then as you go on and you talk about how many people had to have the brackets and how many people had to be calculating, I mean, this became a community-wide effort to make sure that the brackets were calculated correctly and the money went out to the winner correctly, right?
Yes, it was very much a community-based event. We had, I would say, in the 2000s, we probably had, I would say, 60 to about 75, 80 people working this one thing. Like we had computers throughout houses. My mother's living room was filled with computers. We had neighbors that would take in computers, women, like my mother's friends. A lot of them are still here, and they'll tell me like, "Oh my God, I remember being at your house for hours on end." And my mother would sit in the kitchen. My mother smoked cigarettes, so my mother would smoke cigarettes in the kitchen, and she was the money person. And we had a computer guy. Now, another thing is that, I'm happy I could talk about this now because on the podcast, I could branch out a little bit. But we had multiple bars throughout New York taking pics. So, like, if you went to Manhattan, you could find a place downtown, so you didn't have to
So
drive over the
that's how it got
bridge.
so big.
Yeah, that was a big deal. We had multiple bars in Staten Island, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. So we covered three boroughs, and Brooklyn and Manhattan back in the day. I mean, it was wild as a kid too. It was just it's almost doesn't even feel real talking about it now, but it was a reality what was going on.
So does that ever, I know you say it's done, it ended, you're never going back. Now that this has gotten so much attention, is there a little part of you that goes, man, I'd like to see those days again?
Oh yeah, totally. 100%.
No
100%.
hesitation.
No hesitation. And I used to have hesitation about it, because it's a big deal, and it's a legacy that we have, and I know what it would take to do it. But I worry about certain things. Like I have a wife, I have three young kids that I really care about. Obviously, they're my family. Back in the day, it was different. And now it's who knows, but I think it would be pretty cool if I did it. I know it would be a lot of money right away, but I'm enjoying this little ride we're on right now. We're 18 years since we did it, and I think it's as popular now as it's ever been.
Well, absolutely. I mean, my daughter came home, my 11-year-old came home from school the other day and she's like, so I got to work on my bracket with Megan tonight. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I think that's so funny that you have these little kids that, I mean, for them, it's just fun. And, that's some of the people are just doing it for fun. But for you guys, it became a real money machine. But I think the best part about it is it was always just $10 per person, right?
And that's the most unique thing. It never changed from $10.77 to $10.06. People would come up to my dad, you got to make it $20. He was like, no, no, it's 10. It's the fair. Like anybody could be walking down the street and say, hey, I'll walk into Jody's. I'll put a pick in. And you never know, I can be a millionaire. And like that was reality.
Well,
Some of the people.
so that was reality, but that sounds crazy because the first one, 88 people, the winner took home $880. But
Yes.
then suddenly, like you fast forward years later, and it was over $1 million.
Yeah, it was over a million. It went, I remember the numbers vividly. I remember in '02 it was like 530,000. And then in '03 it went up like 200,000. And then '05 it was 1.2, and then in '06 it was 1.6. So we were on pace to like if we made it to '07, we were going to be over $2 million. There was no doubt about it.
Is there a point when that makes you nervous? Like, did
Yeah,
you ever feel like your parents were like, oh my gosh, we're responsible for so much money now?
100%. My mother was, my mom was obviously the brains behind it. Like any good man needs a good woman behind him. Like with my wife, especially. Yeah, my mom was nervous. It was a nerve-wracking time. It was, because my father he was under a lot of scrutiny back then too, because a lot of people, what they would say is like, that's when like the chat room started and like the
Mm-hmm.
internet started growing a little bit, where you could say something and you don't have to put your face to it or your name to it. And there were a lot of hurtful and terrible things being said about my dad. Now, my dad didn't know the internet. If it smacked him in the face, he wouldn't have known what the internet was. But
Sometimes it does smack you in the face.
yeah. My dad, he didn't really know a lot of things were being said, but we ended up telling him. And that was a bad thing for me because I was so upset to see such hurtful things said about my
Mm.
dad. Like, like he's taking money, Jody's pocketing all the money, like that, all that stuff. And that couldn't have been further from the truth. It really couldn't have been. Um, he was an honest person. He really cared about the community. He helped run golf programs in Staten Island. He was very into golf. He really did care about the pool. And to see it end the way it did was heartbreaking for him.
Well,
And
tell
he
us a little bit
never,
about that because I don't think people know exactly how it ended. And after something, I think the important thing to remember is this is something that, like I said, brought the whole community together because you're talking about they had people across the whole community with the computers, with the tickets. There were people managing where the money was being kept to keep the money safe. I mean, this was a community effort. So at the end, it sounds like one of the winners was they reported their winnings to the IRS, and then suddenly he's under the scrutiny. And I think if you look at it from the outside perspective, it's like, oh yeah, you're managing a lot of cash. Now we have a lot more cash businesses, especially with marijuana. And I think people understand like, okay, there are cash businesses and it doesn't mean that people are bad, but this was devastating to you guys.
yeah, it was brutal. It was December of '06. I remember the date so clearly. Like, two agents ended up coming in here from the IRS, scared the daylights out of my dad,
Hmm.
totally. My father was like a frail man, and he really, it changed him considerably. We had to hire a tax lawyer, which ended up costing us like over $200,000 for a lawyer. Multiple hearings we had to go to in Brooklyn federal court. My dad had to like the first like arraignment, like he had to like take his belt off. He had to sit in a jail cell. Like it was brutal for him to go through that. And they thought that they were going to try and maybe they thought they were going to find something on him, and they just didn't. He underreported his income taxes for 3 years, which totaled like $24,000. So you know, in the grand scheme of things, it was like $8,000 a year that he owned a bar restaurant, so it was hard. It was really hard. But in the end, he ended up just getting off. There was no house arrest, nothing like that. Just had to pay some fines. It really took a lot out of him. It really did. It was really rough. It was rough on myself, my brothers, my sisters. I'll still never forget the day when he found out like his fate in a way. Like he could have went to jail, and my father would not have lasted in jail. I don't think he would have survived even a day. But he ended up getting off, because like we said, like he was very much part of the community. He was very friendly with, elected officials, judges, everything. So people knew him through the chain. So he ended up getting off, which was a blessing. I'll still never forget that. That was a Friday, and people came in that night, and it was like a celebration in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a sick celebration, but it was we were celebrating that he was coming home with us, which was really cool. And he
He
was
was a
just
pillar of the community. I mean, people looked up to
oh.
him.
He really was. He was something else. He would do anything for anybody. He really was a good man. he had some great lines. He was really funny. He was a character. I took over from him when he passed away, and I'm not. I'm not. I don't try and be half the person that he was in the community, because he was just such a. He had the name too. Like, his name was Jody. Like, you don't hear many males named Jody, but his name was Joseph. But to everybody, it was just Jody, and it was a tough time, but we did get through it. We've overcome a lot in this business. I've had to overcome a lot too. With COVID and all that stuff, but you know, I guess we just overcome things.
Hey everyone, we've got more coming up on March Madness, but while we're talking money and bets and all of this, I thought, well, it's a good time to talk about my partners at American Alternative, because I know people are seeing the stock market go up and down, and that can be scary, but that's why you need to think about the stability of gold. I'm excited to announce my newest sponsor, American Alternative Assets. They take a different approach to precious metals. American Alternative Assets gets to know you, they get to know your family, and they get to know your needs to make sure precious metals are actually the right choice for you. You should just call and find out if it's a good fit, because I know they only work with people they know they can help. And then once you actually are a client, they provide quarterly check-ins to ensure your strategy is still on the right track. And here's the best part. American Alternative Assets is offering our listeners a free wealth protection guide and up to $10,000 in free silver with a qualified purchase. So call today. You call number 877-522-GOLD or visit tudorsgold.com right now to claim your free wealth protection guide. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect your wealth and secure your future today. That's 877-522-GOLD or visit tudorsgold.com. Now stay tuned. We'll be right back with more about March Madness. And I think that that's what people look at the restaurant business and they say, man, it's a really tough business. And especially after 2020 and what we went through with COVID and looking at, I mean, even here I look around and a lot of restaurants didn't make it, but your restaurant has such a rich history. And again, this is something that I've been talking to people in Michigan about. I'm like, if we can bring back restaurants, if we can bring back community, I mean, that's where the history happens. And I talk about, that's where we go after graduations and for birthdays. And when we celebrate a promotion or when you have a big meeting, you remember the places that you were, because that's what your community is. And when I hear your dad's story, that's exactly what I want to see all across this country is your dad's story, is people coming together, realizing that that's the place to meet. I mean, it's like the Cheers story all over again. There's a whole series. One of the best, most well-loved series on television was about a place like your dad's.
Yeah, we're a lot of people say that it's very much a Cheers type place. Like I said, we're almost 50 years old, and to be able to say that is just, it gives me the chills. I tell everybody when my dad passed and then my mom passed 3 years later, people tell me, oh, you're doing a good job. And I just say, to me, I'm just keeping an eye on their place. And that's how I look at it. It's a hard working job. COVID definitely changed everything in New York, especially.
What was that for the club?
Oh my God. It was rough. It really was. To walk into an empty building basically for a year straight, and then they opened us back up and then they closed us back down. The second closing I thought was the worst, because it was right before Christmas and we knew what to expect at that point. Like, deliveries were only going to get us so far, so yeah, we got through it. I had to lower my staff, and my sister still works for us. She helped us. My wife was a big help. My wife was still home with our kids at the time, so we tried to think of. You had to be creative too. You had to come up with like food specials just for people to call up, and then some of the things that they made us do were just. I mean, if looking back at it, it was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever experienced in my life. Like, one example. We weren't allowed to sit people at the bar, but I was allowed to build a high top table and put it against the bar, and people could sit at the table. I swear, it was so. I lost customers because of it. I really did. Like, I remember one guy, like, we had an outdoor seating, and they told us we weren't allowed to have people stand up. They can only sit. The only time they can stand up was to go to the bathroom. But if you stood next to a table and you talked to the person, You had to be told to sit down. It was wild, and I lost customers because of it. They're like, "Are you kidding me, Terrence?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just want to stay open." It was a tough time. It was a brutal time, actually.
I mean, and you were talking about when your dad went through what he did with the IRS and the cost of that. And I think about how, I mean, you guys really truly are overcomers, because when I thought about that, I thought, well, I mean, COVID had to have been pretty similar. It had to have been a really significant loss.
Yeah, it was terrible, and I joke around with people too, and I always joke around with now looking back, and and I always say when I go and I run into my father again, the first thing I'm going to say to him is, "How'd you like how I handled that pandemic?"
That's what
you
I'm
know.
sure. I'm sure you're like, what would he be doing right now?
Oh my God, I couldn't even imagine. My mother was a tough. She was from Irish immigrants. Her parents were from Ireland. My mother was a tough woman. My mother would have said, "Just stay open."
I love it.
Yeah, but my mom, she kind of gets lost in a lot of this too. Like, she was the real, like when it got big, the pool per se. Like my mom was the one who really ran the pool. Like she was the money person. She was like, when Mary spoke, people listened.
Yeah.
That's how I always say it. And we were so proud of what we were able to accomplish.
It sounds like your dad was kind of like the fun, the guy that everybody wanted to come and see. He was the welcoming. He was
Uh,
kind of the personality behind everything. And your mom was business.
Yeah, my mom was business. He was the personality, definitely. So if people would have say to him, "Hey, Jody, I never see you here anymore," my father would always say, "Yeah, tell my wife that," because my wife would say, "I never see you anymore." So it's like he was being dragged in multiple places. You know, we miss him. I love. This is why I love talking about them, because to me it kind of brings them back for a little bit, and to think about such great memories we all had together.
Yeah, yeah, I feel the same about my dad. I mean,
Yeah.
it is really hard when you lose someone, but then you get to talk about them, and this is such a cool story. I think right now. So, what are you looking at right now in the bracket? Who do you have winning it all?
Well, I went to St. John's, so they lost, unfortunately. So that kind of took the spirit out of it for me. But, I grew up a Duke fan as a kid. I mean,
Oh,
when I was,
Duke. Oh,
well,
that's
I
such an
mean,
insult.
no, 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 no. I'm not really anymore. I've grown up a little bit. So I think I realized I was never going to Duke. So, I like to see, I like Duke. They're very good. I could see them winning the whole thing. They're playing Arizona tonight, just over in Jersey. So a buddy of mine asked me if I wanted to go. I don't think I could pull it off because my kids are very young and we're very into baseball right now and other sports. So
Ah,
it's a
yes.
little tough. My
Opening
daughter's
day.
opening day. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Big Mets fan too. So
Well, of course, my first love is Kentucky. I'll be watching Michigan as well. I'm going to see what happens, but it's always fun. So in Kentucky, I'll just say Kentucky has no national teams. So when Kentucky would win a championship, the entire state rallied around Kentucky. And it was just such an amazing experience. I mean, having come from Chicago, where, everybody obviously was excited about the Bulls. You had Louisville and you had Kentucky. So there was this big rivalry right in the state. And when we would
yeah,
win, the university would just go crazy. Like everybody would go outside and it was just this huge celebration. So I watched that and I think, I mean, that is really very cool. It is,
yeah,
to me, this is so needed right now because the political environment it's just so stressful that when we can focus on feel good stories and sports and that kind of stuff, it just seems like it's a great escape. And I love what you said earlier about there was no internet. So we were just talking to each other. And this, I think, kind of brings that back. And so that there is a selfish part of me that would love to see you do this again because I feel like that would bring that back. Even though it
yeah.
would be online, you would still have a lot of people that would come in and that would bring back that sense of community.
Oh, yeah, no, it would, and I have the name. I have the Jody's name. Like other places have run pools, and they don't succeed, and maybe it's not as honest as it should be. But I'm an honest person. I would whatever comes in would go out. I really put a big splash on it, and what you said before about the internet and stuff like that's how much the ball business has changed. Like I remember as a kid coming in here. after grammar school, I'd walk in at 12 and then we'd have at 12 years old and we'd walk in and be a full bar and everybody just talking to each other. But now, like you look up and I have a full bar and it's like, I have 13 chairs at my bar and like who's on their phone? Nobody's talking to each other. It's just changed so much. Like I miss the old days. I think the old days were great. I mean, I was such a little kid back then, but you know, it's life's changing and, we have to adjust to the times too. So, but
It
it's
is life. And that's I mean, that's kind of been, there's this tug for, I think, our generation, especially because we do remember growing up and remember people always talking and obviously not even having phones in school or any of that. And then there's this drive for us to kind of pull that back. But our kids live in a generation where that is totally different. And their way of communicating is through that phone and through those apps. And I can remember being on my parents' line in the house all night. My mom would get on the other line and get off the phone. You got to go to school tomorrow, But now it's like there's this drive to pull technology away from our kids, but that is also social for them. So it's a challenge right now to balance that.
Totally. Like my daughter is 10 years old. Like she doesn't have a phone yet. Like my wife and I are waiting until the end of 5th grade for her to get a phone, because once they get on the phone, you kind of lose them. You know what I mean? And I don't want to lose I like having them around. I like hearing them yell and fight with each other. So
that won't go away. I can tell you, even once you get a phone, they'll still fight with each other.
No, oh my God, the school drop-offs. Hope I get one good day out of 5. I'll take it.
That's true. How many kids do you have?
I have 3.
Okay. All right.
I have 2 boys and a girl.
I have 4 girls, and this morning, one of the first things I said was, do we have to constantly pick at each other? Can we just not pick at each other?
Before we go downstairs, I'll say, can we just have one morning go smooth? And doesn't happen.
Well, that's real life. That's the beauty of it. And I so appreciate your story. Okay, so tell everybody how they get to your bar, where it is, what they can do, and how they can just continue the tradition.
Sure. Yeah. We're at Jody's Club Forest. We're at 372 Forest Avenue in Staten Island. We're just a short, boat ride over from Manhattan. We're on the North Shore of Staten Island, very much like we've spoken about. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows your business before even you know your business. You come into our place and you kind of feel like family once you walk in. We're around, like I said, almost 50 years. And I'm going to keep it going as long as possible. We have great food. We have a party room now. We expanded. And another thing we didn't talk about before was like when we ran the pool, we were only where this building I am in now, and we expanded to the other side. So we added another like 1,800 square feet. So that's like where we used to take the pics over there. And that was a dry cleaner too. That adds to the story too. There's just so much to it. But now we're a restaurant. We do a lot of parties, very, very family friendly, very family friendly. Like our Little League is right down the block. We get a lot of families in after games. And, we're very proud of Jody's and, we're going to keep it going as long as we can.
Well, if I could encourage you a little bit, I would say that if you put up a few pictures or a plaque about the March Madness stuff, I just think that would be such a delight for all of us from other states to come and stop by and just see where it all started. So I would encourage you to do that.
I will. And when I do, you'll be the first to know.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming on today. It was so much fun to talk to you.
Yes, this is very nice. Yeah. And good luck to you with everything. And, I'll be watching your show and I appreciate you having me on as well.
Absolutely. All right. Terence Haggerty, make sure you check out the club. It's a place where, like he said, it's for families, it's for everyone, but it's got a rich history and it's a big part of the community. So thank you so much for coming on.
You got it too. You have a good one.
Thanks. And thank you all for listening today to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. For this episode and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com, the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time. Have a blessed day.